Ambassador Zexthera had seen many things in her 4 centuries of diplomatic service to the Galactic Council. She had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, negotiated peace between species that communicated through electromagnetic pulses, and even survived the infamous Rigel incident where an entire star system had been accidentally converted into a giant musical instrument. But nothing in her extensive experience had prepared her for the sight before her. The human delegation sat across from her in the pristine White Council chamber, looking utterly unremarkable. Their leader, a middle-aged woman named Director Sarah Chen, wore a simple black suit that wouldn't have looked out of place in any of 1,000 different galactic cultures. Her hair was graying at the temples, her expression politely attentive, and her technology appeared to consist of nothing more sophisticated than a basic data pad that probably couldn't even access quantum networks. It was almost insulting. The Zephyrians had brought gravitational field generators. The Cortani delegation sported neural interface crowns that glowed with sentient energy. Even the relatively primitive Baxturi had cybernetic implants that enhanced their natural telepathic abilities. The humans had brought what appeared to be a notebook and a pen. Honored delegates, Zexthera began, her 4 vocal cords producing the harmonic tones required for formal galactic address. We convene today to discuss Earth's application for full membership in the Galactic Council. As per standard protocol, applicant species must demonstrate technological advancement sufficient to contribute meaningfully to galactic civilization. Director Chen nodded politely. Of course, Ambassador. We're prepared to present our credentials. Very good. Zexthera consulted her floating holographic display, noting the various technological benchmarks that Earth would need to meet. Let us begin with basic energy generation. Current Council minimum standards require the ability to harness stellar energy at 93% efficiency. Your preliminary reports indicate Earth operates at approximately 12% efficiency with primitive fusion reactions. Is this accurate? That's correct for our publicly available infrastructure, Chen replied calmly. The qualifier made Zexthera pause. Publicly available? I'm sorry, could you clarify? The fusion reactors you've observed power our civilian grid and basic infrastructure. They're intentionally kept at low efficiency levels to prevent accidents and maintain stability for our general population. Councillor Vexmar of the Hegemony leaned forward, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into prismatic patterns. Are you suggesting you possess more advanced energy generation capabilities that you've concealed from our inspection teams? Not concealed, Chen said. Simply not relevant to day-to-day operations. Like most species, we maintain certain technologies for specialized applications. Such as? Zexthera prompted. Chen tapped her simple data pad. The chamber's lights dimmed for a moment, then returned to normal. I've just activated a zero-point energy extractor located in our solar system's asteroid belt. It's currently generating approximately 10 to the 23rd watts of power, which we're storing in localized space-time distortion fields for future use. The chamber fell silent. Zexthera felt her secondary heart skip a beat. Zero-point energy extraction was theoretical at best for most council species. The mathematical framework existed, but the engineering challenges were considered insurmountable. The energy levels Chen had mentioned were sufficient to power the entire council's core worlds for several years. That's quite a claim, Vexmar managed. You're suggesting you've solved the containment problem for vacuum energy fluctuations? Oh, we solved that decades ago, Chen said with the casual tone one might use to discuss the weather. The real breakthrough was learning to harvest dark energy interactions. Zero-point extraction is just the foundation level. Ambassador Trixinael from the archive world spoke up, her cybernetic implants glowing brighter as she accessed vast databases of scientific knowledge. Director Chen, our most advanced physicists have determined that direct dark energy manipulation would require technology capable of rewriting fundamental universal constants. The computational power alone would exceed anything possible with conventional matter. You're absolutely right, Chen agreed cheerfully. Conventional matter can't handle those calculations. That's why we had to develop new forms of matter. The statement hung in the air like a challenge to reality itself. Zexthera found herself struggling to process what she'd heard. New forms of matter? Programmable matter, primarily. Matter that exists in quantum superposition until we need it to perform specific functions. We can literally think new elements into existence when we need them. Chen made another note on her pad. It took us a while to figure out how to keep them stable, but once we discovered how to anchor exotic matter to baseline reality through consciousness-mediated quantum observation, the applications became endless. Counselor Drekhan from the warrior caste world stood abruptly, his massive form towering over the conference table. This is absurd. You're claiming to have transcended the fundamental laws of physics while living in a system so primitive you haven't even built a proper orbital ring around your star. Why would we need an orbital ring? Chen asked, genuinely curious. They're terribly inefficient. All that matter and energy locked into maintaining a static structure when you could achieve the same results with dynamic probability fields. We can manipulate solar output directly through quantum field adjustments. Quantum field adjustments, Zexthera repeated slowly. Small ones, mostly. We've found that large-scale alterations can have unpredictable effects on neighboring star systems. We learned that lesson during the Alpha Centauri incident. What Alpha Centauri incident? Oh, just a minor miscalculation when we were testing our stellar engineering capabilities. We accidentally increased the gravitational constant in that region by about 3% for approximately 47 minutes. Nothing too dramatic, but it did cause some local spacetime distortions. TrixNAL's database implants were now glowing so brightly they cast shadows across the chamber. Director Chen, you're describing capabilities that would classify your species not as applicants for council membership, but as potential Gardner-level entities. The Gardners were a theoretical classification, being so advanced that they could cultivate and guide entire galactic clusters. No known species had ever achieved such status, and most council scientists believed it was purely hypothetical. That's very flattering, Chen said, but we prefer to think of ourselves as engineers. We just happen to work on a slightly larger scale than most. Drekhan's combat instincts were clearly triggering. Zexthera could see the biological stress patterns in his posture that indicated preparation for violence. If humans possess such capabilities, why have you maintained the pretense of primitive development? Why subject yourselves to our evaluation at all? Chen's expression grew more serious. Because we've learned that rapid technological advancement without proper social frameworks can be problematic. We've spent the last several centuries carefully integrating our capabilities with ethical frameworks and social stability measures. We wanted to understand how other species handle the transition to advanced technology before fully revealing our own progress. You've been studying us, Zexthera realized. Learning from you, Chen corrected. The Council has maintained galactic peace for over 12,000 years. That's an impressive achievement. We wanted to understand the social and political structures that make such stability possible. Vexmar's crystalline form was shifting through colors that indicated deep concern. If you've possessed these capabilities for centuries, why reveal them now? Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. Because we've detected something approaching our galaxy that requires the combined attention of all advanced civilizations. Something that makes our technological achievements look primitive by comparison. The chamber's environmental systems kicked in as atmospheric tension rose. Zexthera felt her diplomatic training engaging, pushing down the panic that threatened to surface. What kind of something? We're not entirely sure. Our deep space monitoring systems first detected it approximately 18 months ago. It appears to be artificial in nature, roughly the size of a solar system, and it's moving toward the galactic core in a way that suggests intelligence and purpose. Chen tapped her pad again, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, except this wasn't standard holographic technology. The image had depth and substance that made it seem more real than the chamber itself. We've designated it Object 77 Alpha. Based on its trajectory and current velocity, it will reach Council space in approximately 43 years. Our analysis suggests it's some kind of harvesting entity, possibly automated, possibly controlled by intelligence we can't yet comprehend. The image showed a vast, dark structure that seemed to bend light around itself. Even through the holographic representation, Zexthera could sense something fundamentally wrong about its geometry. It hurt to look at directly. What does it harvest? Trixnal asked, though her voice suggested she suspected the answer. Everything, as far as we can determine. Matter, energy, spacetime itself. It appears to convert entire star systems into some kind of exotic energy that it then incorporates into its own structure. Based on spectral analysis, we believe it's consumed at least 47 solar systems in the past 1,000 years. Drekhan sat down heavily. Even warrior caste conditioning had limits. Why are you telling us this now? Because our preliminary defensive calculations indicate that no single species, regardless of technological advancement, can successfully repel this entity. It will require cooperation on a scale never before attempted, pooling not just military resources, but fundamental scientific knowledge and technological capabilities. Chen stood and moved to the window that looked out over the Council's core world. The city below stretched to the horizon, a testament to thousands of years of collaborative civilization. We've spent the last 3 centuries developing technology specifically designed for defensive applications against unknown threats. We can manipulate matter and energy in ways that would seem impossible, but this entity appears to operate on principles that transcend our current understanding of physics. She turned back to face the assembled delegates. We need to know everything the Council knows about advanced physics, exotic matter, and high-energy applications. In return, we're prepared to share our complete technological database with all Council member species. Complete technological database? Vexmar's color shifts were now cycling through the full spectrum of hegemony emotional states. Everything. 0-point energy extraction, exotic matter manipulation, consciousness-mediated quantum mechanics, stellar engineering, spacetime modification, probability field dynamics, and roughly 3,000 other major technological categories we've developed. Zexthera felt reality tilting around her. The implications were staggering. If humans were offering their complete technological knowledge in exchange for cooperation against this threat, then either they were more desperate than they appeared, or the threat was more serious than anything the galaxy had ever faced. Director Chen, she said carefully, you're asking us to fundamentally restructure our understanding of physics and technology while simultaneously preparing for a threat that may be beyond our comprehension. The social and political implications alone are manageable if we work together, Chen interrupted gently. We've run extensive probability analyses. The optimal outcome requires full technological integration between all galactic species within 37 years. After that point, successful defense becomes increasingly unlikely. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of environmental systems. Zexthera looked around at her fellow delegates, seeing her own confusion and concern reflected in their varied expressions. We'll need to see proof, she said finally. Demonstrable evidence of these claimed capabilities. Chen nodded. Of course. I've prepared a small demonstration. She tapped her pad one final time. In approximately 60 seconds, you'll be able to observe the activation of our lunar manufacturing facility. We're going to construct a basic defensive satellite using programmable matter and 0-point energy systems. Constructed where? Trixnal asked. In Earth's orbit. The satellite will be approximately 12 kilometers in diameter and capable of generating defensive fields sufficient to protect a small planet. Total construction time will be approximately 90 seconds once fabrication begins. Through the chamber's massive windows, the delegates could see into space where Earth's moon hung like a pale jewel against the starfield. As they watched, a brilliant point of light appeared on the lunar surface, not an explosion, but something that seemed to bend space itself. The light expanded, and something impossible began to take shape in the space between Earth and its moon. Matter was flowing out of nothing, organizing itself into complex geometric patterns that grew with breathtaking speed. What had been empty space was becoming a massive, crystalline structure that pulsed with energies that made the chamber's sensors emit warning signals. Within 2 minutes, a structure larger than most space stations hung in Earth's orbit, its surfaces reflecting starlight in patterns that suggested technology beyond anything in the Council's database. The satellite is now operational, Chen announced calmly. It's powered by a localized zero-point generator and protected by probability distortion shields. We could build 1,000 similar structures in less than an hour if needed. Zexthera stared at the impossible structure, her mind struggling to process the implications. Humanity hadn't just advanced beyond Council technology, they had transcended the fundamental limitations that governed galactic civilization. And, if they needed the Council's help to face this approaching threat, then, perhaps the galaxy was in more danger than anyone had imagined. 3 weeks had passed since Director Chen's revelation, and the Galactic Council's core worlds were in chaos. Not the violent, destructive chaos of war or natural disaster, but the deep, unsettling chaos that comes when the fundamental assumptions underlying an entire civilization suddenly prove to be wrong. Ambassador Zexthera stood in the Council's Strategic Analysis Center, watching streams of data flow across holographic displays that showed the galaxy in unprecedented detail. Every major world was buzzing with activity as governments, scientific institutions, and military organizations tried to process the implications of humanity's technological revelations. The carefully maintained balance of power that had kept galactic peace for millennia was reshaping itself in real time. The hegemony has recalled all their deep space exploration fleets, reported analyst Kexnor, his tentacles dancing across control surfaces with nervous energy. They're restructuring their entire military doctrine based on human defensive technologies. The archive worlds have started emergency sessions to integrate human scientific data into their knowledge banks, and the warrior caste worlds are requesting immediate technological exchanges for weapons development. Zexthera nodded grimly. She had expected this reaction. When a species suddenly revealed capabilities that rendered existing power structures obsolete, every faction would scramble to either align themselves with the new dominant force or find ways to counter it. What about the smaller worlds? Panic, mostly. The Verdani Collective has sealed their borders entirely and activated their planetary shields. The merchant guilds are frantically trying to establish exclusive trade agreements with Earth. And the neutral zones have started broadcasting surrender messages in case this is some kind of human conquest strategy. Director Chen was right about the social implications, Zexthera murmured. She turned to the central display, which showed a real-time tactical analysis of the human satellite they had constructed during the demonstration. Council sensors had been studying it continuously for 3 weeks, and the results were both fascinating and terrifying. The structure existed in a state of controlled quantum flux, its very atoms shifting between different probability states depending on external conditions. When Council ships approached for closer inspection, the satellite's defenses didn't activate energy shields or deploy weapons. Instead, it appeared to alter the fundamental constants of physics in its immediate vicinity. Ships found their engines producing impossible thrust ratios, their sensors detecting readings that violated basic mathematics, and their navigation systems reporting locations that couldn't exist. Most disturbing was the satellite's apparent consciousness. It didn't just respond to threats, it anticipated them, sometimes reacting to hostile intentions before ships had even begun to approach. The implications for space-based warfare were staggering. Ambassador, Kexnor called out, we're receiving a priority transmission from the archive worlds. Curator Trix NAL requests immediate council session. She says they've made a significant discovery regarding the approaching entity. Zexthera felt her dual hearts skip. The archive worlds contained the galaxy's most comprehensive collection of historical and scientific data. If they had found something relevant to Object 77 Alpha, it could change everything. An hour later, the council chamber was filled to capacity. Representatives from every major faction had arrived, along with observers from dozens of minor worlds. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation and underlying fear. Curator Trix NAL materialized in the center of the chamber through quantum projection, her consciousness transmitted from the archive worlds at faster than light speeds. Her cybernetic implants were glowing more brightly than Zexthera had ever seen, indicating massive data processing loads. Honored delegates, Trix NAL began, our analysis of Director Chen's data regarding Object 77 Alpha has yielded disturbing correlations with historical records. We believe we have identified what humanity detected approaching our galaxy. A massive holographic display activated, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with temporal overlays spanning hundreds of thousands of years. Points of light mark the locations of advanced civilizations throughout history, with different colors indicating different time periods. Approximately 800,000 years ago, the galaxy contains 17 major galactic-level civilizations. All possess technology roughly equivalent to our current Council capabilities. Based on archaeological evidence, they maintained a cooperative alliance similar to our own governing structure. The display shifted, showing the gradual disappearance of several civilizations over a period of about 50,000 years. The decline began in the outer spiral arm and progressed inward toward the galactic core. At first, our predecessors attributed the disappearances to natural evolution, internal conflicts, or migration to other galaxies. However, recently discovered archives from the predecessor hegemony paint a different picture. New data streams appeared on the display, fragmentary records written in dozens of extinct languages. The final archives describe an entity they called the Harvester, a construct of unknown origin that consumed entire solar systems to fuel its own growth. The descriptions match human sensor data of Object 77 Alpha with 97% accuracy. A collective murmur rippled through the chamber. Councillor Drekhan stood up, his massive frame radiating tension. Are you saying this entity has appeared before? That it's responsible for the decline of previous galactic civilizations? Not appeared before, Trix NAL corrected. It never left. Our analysis suggests Object 77 Alpha is the same entity that destroyed the predecessor civilizations. It's been traveling in a cyclic pattern, harvesting resources from one region of the galaxy while other areas develop new civilizations. The implications hit the chamber like a physical force. Zexthara found herself gripping her chair to remain steady. How long are the cycles? Based on stellar dating of destroyed systems, approximately 800,000 years. This entity returns to harvest each region of the galaxy after sufficient time has passed for new civilizations to develop exploitable technology and infrastructure. Director Chen's voice came from the human delegation section, calm despite the magnitude of the revelation. Which means we're not dealing with an external threat. This is a cyclical pruning mechanism that treats galactic civilization like a renewable resource. Precisely, Trix NAL confirmed. The entity appears to follow a pattern: harvest advanced technology and energy sources, then withdraw to allow new civilizations to develop. When sufficient advancement has occurred, return and repeat the cycle. Councillor Vexmar's crystalline form was cycling through colors that indicated profound distress. Do the archives indicate how previous civilizations attempted to defend against it? The curator's expression grew even more grim. They tried everything we would try. Combined military fleets, advanced weaponry, defensive alliances. According to the final records, the entity adapted to each new strategy faster than civilizations could develop countermeasures. It appears to learn from each encounter, incorporating captured technology and knowledge into its own capabilities. Which explains why it's so much more powerful now than it was 800,000 years ago, Chen observed. It's been accumulating the combined technological achievement of dozens of galactic civilizations. Silence fell over the chamber as delegates processed this information. They weren't just facing an advanced alien threat, they were facing an entity that had consumed the accumulated knowledge and technology of their galaxy's entire civilizational history. There is one potentially significant difference this time, Trix NAL continued. Previous galactic civilizations appear to have developed along similar technological paths. Energy manipulation, faster-than-light travel, advanced materials science, all following predictable progression patterns. Humanity's development appears to be fundamentally different. She activated a new display showing comparative technological development curves. Most species showed gradual, linear advancement along established principles. Humanity's curve looked like an explosion. Human technology appears to be based on manipulation of reality at the quantum level rather than working within established physical laws. This represents a completely different approach to advanced engineering, one that may not be predictable to an entity that has learned to counter conventional technological development. Director Chen stood and moved to the center of the chamber. Curator Trix NAL is correct, but there's something else you need to understand. We didn't develop our technology in isolation. She paused, and Zextera could see something in her expression, a weight of knowledge that hadn't been there before. Humanity has encountered remnants of the predecessor civilizations. Hidden archives, automated defense systems, and other survivors who went into deep concealment when the Harvester last passed through their regions. The revelation sent shock waves through the chamber. Contact with predecessor civilizations was the holy grail of galactic archaeology, knowledge that could advance any species by millions of years. 300 years ago, we discovered a predecessor research station hidden in the gravitational shadow of a rogue planet in our outer system. The facility was still operational, maintained by artificial intelligences that had been waiting for someone to find them. Chen activated her datapad, and new images appeared: vast underground complexes filled with technology that seemed to blend seamlessly with living systems. The predecessors weren't just advanced, they were actively working on methods to break the Harvester's cycle. They had identified the fundamental problem: the entity learns and adapts faster than conventional technology can evolve. So they began developing technology that could evolve and adapt in real time. Programmable matter, Zextera breathed. Programmable matter was just the beginning. The predecessors were working on programmable reality technology that could alter the fundamental laws of physics in localized areas, making it impossible for the Harvester to predict or counter their capabilities. Chen's expression grew more intense. They didn't complete their work before the Harvester found them, but they left detailed research data and theoretical frameworks. Human scientists have spent 3 centuries building on their foundation. New displays showed vast research installations hidden throughout Earth's solar system, facilities that existed in folded space, underwater cities with technology that bent light around them, and orbital platforms that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. We've moved beyond programmable reality into what we call intentional physics, technology that responds directly to conscious intent rather than predetermined programming. Our defensive systems don't just adapt to threats, they anticipate hostile intentions and modify local reality to neutralize them. Drekhan's warrior instincts were clearly struggling with concepts that transcended conventional warfare. How can we fight alongside technology we don't understand? You don't need to understand it, Chen replied. You need to provide something equally valuable: knowledge of how the Harvester operates. The predecessor archives contained defensive research but limited tactical data. The Council's historical records, combined with your various species' unique capabilities, will allow us to develop comprehensive defensive strategies. She gestured toward the display showing Object 77 Alpha's approach trajectory. But we need to move quickly. Our analysis indicates the entity will begin long-range reconnaissance of Council space within 18 months. Once it starts gathering data about current galactic capabilities, our window for surprise will close permanently. Trix NAL's projection flickered as massive data transfers continued between the archive worlds and the Council chamber. Director Chen, our preliminary analysis of human technological data suggests your capabilities exceed anything in our historical records. If the predecessors couldn't defeat the Harvester with similar technology, how can we hope to succeed? Shen smiled for the first time since entering the chamber, and there was something in that expression that made Zextera feel both hopeful and slightly frightened. Because the predecessors were trying to fight the Harvester using its own rules: advanced technology versus advanced technology, intelligence against intelligence. We're going to do something different. She tapped her pad, and the chamber's entire wall became a window looking out into space where the human satellite hung in Earth's orbit. We're going to make the galaxy itself fight back. As if responding to her words, the satellite pulsed with energy that made space itself seem to ripple. For just a moment, the stars beyond appeared to shift position, as if reality had briefly forgotten its own rules. The galaxy was about to become a very dangerous place for anything that wanted to harvest it. The transformation began slowly, then accelerated beyond anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Within 6 months of humanity's revelation, the fundamental nature of interstellar civilization was reshaping itself in ways that would have been unthinkable just a year earlier. Captain Zarek of the Hegemony Defense Fleet found himself standing in what had once been a standard military briefing room, now converted into something that challenged his understanding of reality itself. The walls displayed tactical information, but not through conventional holographic projection. Instead, the data seemed to exist as living light that responded to his thoughts, reorganizing itself based on his focus and curiosity. The integration is proceeding faster than we anticipated, reported Commander Sarah Foster, the human liaison assigned to help implement their new technologies. She appeared relaxed despite overseeing the most complex technological transfer in galactic history. Your crews are adapting to consciousness interfaced systems more quickly than our models predicted. Zarek studied the tactical displays showing the deployment of Joint Human Council defensive positions throughout their region of the galaxy. What he saw should have been impossible: entire fleets working with technology that hadn't existed a year ago, weapons systems that operated on principles that his military academy training said were fantasy, and defensive networks that treated space itself as a programmable medium. Commander Foster, he said carefully, my tactical officers report that our new shield generators are producing defensive fields with energy outputs that exceed our ship's total power generation capacity. How is this possible? Foster smiled, an expression that Zarek had learned meant humanity was about to explain something that would make his brain hurt. Your shields aren't generating energy, Captain. They're borrowing it from adjacent parallel universes where your ships never existed. The energy differential creates a protective barrier without drawing on your ship's power systems. Zarek felt his secondary nervous system engage, an evolutionary response to concepts that threatened to overwhelm his primary consciousness. Parallel universes? Think of it as accessing unused potential energy from probability space. Every decision creates multiple potential outcomes. We've learned to tap into the energy that would have existed if different choices had been made. The explanation made a sort of sideways sense, which was typical of human technology. Nothing they created worked the way conventional physics suggested it should, yet the results were undeniably effective. Captain, called out his sensor officer, Lieutenant Vexnara, were receiving a priority transmission from the archive worlds. Curator Trix NAL requests immediate conference with all sector commanders. Minutes later, Zarek found himself in a virtual conference space that existed somewhere between normal reality and the quantum networks that connected all council worlds. Representatives from dozens of species appeared as thought projections, their consciousness temporarily linked through human-designed interface systems that made faster-than-light communication look primitive. Curator Trix NAL's projection materialized with unusual urgency, her cybernetic implants glowing so brightly they cast shadows in the virtual space. Honored commanders, we have detected significant changes in Object 77 Alpha's behavior. The entity has begun preliminary scanning of our galactic region approximately 14 months ahead of our projected timeline. A tactical display filled the virtual space, showing the approaching entity's position and energy signatures. What Zarek saw made his combat instincts freeze with recognition. The scanning patterns were identical to pre-battle reconnaissance used by advanced military forces. The Harvester is adapting, Director Chen observed, her projection appearing with the subtle reality distortions that indicated she was simultaneously present in multiple locations. It's detected our defensive preparations and is accelerating its approach schedule. Commander Drakthal from the Warrior Caste worlds leaned forward, his massive projection radiating aggressive intent. How much time do we have? Based on current acceleration curves, first contact in approximately 8 months, Trix NAL replied. However, the entity's scanning behavior suggests it may begin active probing of our defenses much sooner. Zarek studied the tactical data, his military training analyzing threat patterns and defensive options. What he saw was both encouraging and terrifying. The Joint Human Council defensive network was unlike anything in galactic military history, not just advanced weapons and shields, but reality modification systems that could alter the fundamental rules of engagement. Director Chen, he said, our forces are still adapting to the new technologies. Most of our crews can barely operate basic consciousness interface systems, let alone the advanced reality modification weapons. That's why we're implementing the next phase of integration, Chen replied. We're going to accelerate the adaptation process using direct neural interfacing. The statement sent ripples of concern through the assembled commanders. Neural interfacing was one thing when dealing with conventional technology, but human systems operated on principles that could potentially overwhelm or permanently alter alien consciousness. Is that safe? Asked Fleet Admiral Kexdara from the neutral zones, her aquatic species concerns about mental contamination evident in her bioluminescent displays. We've developed safeguards based on each species' neurological architecture, Foster's projection assured them. The interface systems will adapt to your consciousness patterns rather than forcing you to adapt to them. Think of it as temporary enhancement rather than permanent modification. Chen activated new displays showing the progression of enhanced crews already working with advanced human technology. Ships were moving in ways that defied conventional physics, weapons were firing projectiles that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and defensive systems were creating protection zones that treated incoming attacks as mere probability variables to be adjusted. The enhanced crews are reporting combat effectiveness improvements of approximately 3,000%, Chen continued. More importantly, they're beginning to understand how to modify local reality in real time. When the harvester arrives, we won't just be fighting with advanced weapons, we'll be fighting with the fundamental forces of existence itself. Curator Trixnal's projection flickered as she processed vast amounts of incoming data. Director Chen, we've also detected something else. The harvester's scanning has awakened automated defense systems left behind by the predecessor civilizations. Several hidden installations have come online throughout our galactic region. New markers appeared on the tactical display, ancient facilities that had been dormant for hundreds of thousands of years, now broadcasting recognition signals and defensive postures. The predecessors built contingency systems? Drakthal asked. Emergency protocols, Chen confirmed. Facilities designed to activate when the harvester returned. They'd been waiting in powered-down states, hidden in dimensional pockets and gravity wells that made them undetectable to conventional sensors. Zarek counted the new markers and felt a surge of hope. How many installations? 47 major defensive platforms, over 300 automated weapons systems, and at least 12 facilities we can't identify yet, Trixnal reported. All equipped with technology that predates current galactic civilization by hundreds of thousands of years. But there's a complication, Chen added, and Zarek heard the familiar tone that meant humanity was about to reveal something that would change everything again. The predecessor systems are designed to work with consciousness-based technology, but they require direct neural integration to operate effectively. No safeguards, no adaptation protocols. Anyone who interfaces with them will be permanently altered. The virtual conference space fell silent as commanders processed the implications. The predecessor technology could provide exactly the force multiplier they needed to face the harvester, but using it would fundamentally change whoever operated it. What kind of alterations? Admiral Kexdara asked quietly. Enhanced cognitive capacity, direct quantum perception, ability to manipulate matter and energy through conscious intent. Essentially, temporary transcendence to a higher level of existence. Foster's projection shifted, indicating she was accessing real-time data. We've begun preliminary integration with several predecessor installations. The volunteer crews report significant changes in perspective and capability. A new display showed human crews working with technology that seemed to respond to their thoughts before they had fully formed them. Ships were moving through space in ways that ignored conventional physics, and weapons systems were firing projectiles that appeared to travel through folded spacetime. The enhanced crews are no longer entirely human, Chen admitted. They retain their personalities and memories, but their consciousness now operates on multiple dimensional levels simultaneously. They can perceive and manipulate reality in ways that baseline consciousness cannot comprehend. Zarek felt his warrior instincts warring with his tactical judgment. The enhanced capabilities could provide exactly the advantage they needed, but the cost was essentially becoming something other than their original species. Director Chen, he said carefully, are you asking us to volunteer our crews for permanent transformation? I'm asking you to consider it as an option. The enhanced crews will be our primary interface with predecessor technology, but conventional forces will still have critical roles to play. We need both enhanced and baseline consciousness working together. Drakthal's projection expanded, indicating aggressive interest. What roles for conventional forces? Support operations, resource management, and, most importantly, maintaining connection to baseline reality. The enhanced crews can manipulate local physics, but they need baseline consciousness to anchor them to standard spacetime. Without that anchor, they risk becoming so detached from normal reality that they can't interact effectively with conventional matter and energy. The tactical display updated again, showing proposed force distributions that mixed enhanced crews, conventional forces, and automated predecessor systems in complex operational patterns. Each engagement will require three-tier coordination, Foster explained. Enhanced crews to manipulate local reality and operate predecessor weapons, conventional forces to maintain tactical stability and coordinate with non-enhanced systems, and automated installations to provide heavy firepower and defensive screening. Curator Trixenal's implants pulsed with urgent patterns. Commanders, I'm detecting new activity from the Harvester. It's begun deploying scout elements, smaller constructs that appear to be testing our outer defensive perimeter. The virtual space filled with new tactical data showing fast-moving objects approaching Council territory. The scout constructs were each roughly the size of a battleship, but they moved through space in ways that ignored conventional physics, appearing to phase in and out of normal reality. First contact in approximately 6 weeks, Chen announced. All volunteer crews for neural enhancement need to report to integration facilities within the next 10 days. After that, we'll need to maintain operational security to prevent the Harvester from analyzing our enhanced capabilities before the main engagement. Zarek looked around at the assembled commanders, seeing his own mixture of determination and apprehension reflected in their various expressions. They were about to face something that had destroyed every advanced civilization in galactic history, using technology that would fundamentally alter anyone who used it. How many volunteers do we need? He asked. Approximately 12,000 enhanced crew members across all our forces. About 3% of total personnel. The number seemed small, but Zarek understood the mathematics of exponential force multiplication. 3% enhanced crews could coordinate with predecessor installations to create defensive capabilities that exceeded anything in the galaxy's history. I'll take the first enhancement slot for the hegemony forces, he decided. His tactical experience would be essential for coordinating enhanced operations with conventional forces. Similar declarations echoed around the virtual conference space as commanders volunteered themselves and their crews for transformation. Within minutes, the volunteer roster was complete. In 6 weeks, they would discover whether consciousness-enhanced tactics could break a cycle that had dominated galactic history for nearly 1,000,000 years. The alternative was becoming another harvested civilization in the entity's endless collection. The galaxy was about to find out what happened when prey decided to evolve faster than predators could adapt. Captain Zarek no longer experienced reality the way he had been born to experience it. The neural enhancement process had concluded 72 hours ago, and he was still discovering new dimensions of perception with each passing moment. What had once been the simple bridge of his command ship was now a multidimensional space where he could perceive the quantum probability states of every system, the consciousness patterns of his crew, and the subtle reality distortions that indicated nearby human technology. His enhanced awareness extended beyond the ship itself. He could sense the positions and emotional states of other vessels in the fleet, the energy signatures of predecessor installations scattered throughout the system, and, most disturbing of all, the approaching scout constructs from the Harvester entity. They felt wrong in ways that his enhanced consciousness could perceive but not fully understand, like holes in reality that moved with malevolent purpose. Captain, called out Commander Vexnara, his tactical officer who had also volunteered for enhancement, the human coordination systems are requesting tactical integration for the first engagement protocols. Vexnara's voice carried harmonics that hadn't existed before enhancement. Her consciousness now operated on frequencies that allowed direct communication with the ship's reality modification systems. When she spoke, the bridge's probability field shifted in response to her intentions. Establish neural link, Zarek replied, and felt his awareness expand again as connection established with the Joint Human Council Tactical Network. Suddenly, he was everywhere at once. His consciousness touched the bridge of Director Chen's command vessel, where human and enhanced council crews worked with technology that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. He sensed Commander Foster's position on a predecessor installation that phased in and out of normal space like a quantum lighthouse. His awareness connected with enhanced crews throughout the defensive network, hegemony ships, archive vessels, warrior caste battleships, and human constructs that defied classification. Through the network, he could perceive the approaching harvester scouts in perfect detail. There were 47 of them, moving through space in a formation that suggested intelligence and purpose. Each construct was roughly the size of a conventional battleship, but they were composed of materials that existed in multiple phases of matter simultaneously. Most disturbing was their method of movement. They appeared to be consuming spacetime itself as propulsion, leaving temporary voids in reality that quickly collapsed back to normal. All enhanced crews, this is Director Chen, came the communication through the neural link. Her thoughts carried information density that would have overwhelmed baseline consciousness. First engagement commences in 11 minutes. Remember, our primary objective is analysis. We need to understand how these scouts operate before the main entity arrives. Through the network, Zarek could sense the tactical preparations unfolding across dozens of star systems. Enhanced crews were activating predecessor weapons that hadn't fired in 800,000 years. Reality modification systems were warming up, preparing to alter local physics in ways that would confuse and disorient conventional threats. Probability fields were being established to create zones where the normal laws of physics operated according to modified parameters. Zarek, came a direct neural communication from Foster. Your battle group will be testing kinetic disruption tactics. Try to determine if the scouts can adapt to weapons that exist in multiple probability states simultaneously. He acknowledged and turned his enhanced perception to his fleet's weapons systems. What had once been conventional energy cannons and missile launchers had been modified with human consciousness interface technology. The weapons no longer fired simple projectiles, they fired directed reality distortions that could exist as matter, energy, or pure information depending on tactical requirements. Weapons systems report ready, Vexnara announced, though her words were unnecessary. Through the neural link, Zarek could feel the readiness state of every system on every ship in his battle group. Enhanced tactical crews, prepare for first contact, came Chen's communication to the entire network. Through his expanded awareness, Zarek watched the scout constructs enter the outer perimeter of their defensive network. Immediately, the predecessor installations began responding. Ancient weapons systems that had waited nearly 1,000,000 years for this moment activated with lethal precision. The first salvo was unlike anything in modern galactic military history. Predecessor beam weapons fired projectiles that seemed to travel backward through time, striking the scout constructs before the weapons had finished charging. Reality modification systems created localized zones where the fundamental constants of physics were altered, causing several scouts to simply cease existing as they entered regions where their molecular structure was no longer stable. But the scouts adapted. Within seconds of the first attack, the remaining constructs began altering their own composition and movement patterns. They shifted from solid matter to energy states that made them immune to conventional weapons, then changed to hybrid forms that seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime. They're learning faster than we anticipated, Foster reported through the neural link. Switching to consciousness-based weapons. Enhanced crews throughout the network began implementing tactics that had never been tested in actual combat. Ships fired weapons that responded to the pilot's intent rather than programmed targeting systems. Defensive fields were generated that protected not against specific types of damage, but against hostile intentions regardless of their form. Zarek focused his consciousness through his ship's enhanced weapons systems and fired at the nearest scout construct. The weapon responded by creating a projectile that existed as a focused beam of pure intent, a manifestation of his desire to neutralize the threat that took whatever form would be most effective against its target. The projectile struck the scout and seemed to pass through it harmlessly. Then, suddenly, the construct began disintegrating from the inside as its own systems turned against it. The consciousness-guided weapon had convinced the scouts controlling intelligence to disable itself. Effective against isolated targets, Zarek reported through the neural link. But they're adapting. Watch the formation changes. The remaining scouts were indeed adapting, but not in ways that conventional military doctrine would have predicted. Instead of changing their weapons or defenses, they were altering their consciousness patterns. The entities were becoming less individual and more collective, sharing sensory data and tactical analysis instantaneously across their entire force. They're implementing distributed consciousness, Chen observed. Each scout is becoming part of a larger intelligence network. Our consciousness-based weapons are less effective against collective targets. Foster's response carried urgency that resonated through the neural link. Switching to reality anchor tactics. All enhanced crews, prepare to lock local spacetime to baseline physics. This was the most dangerous tactical option they had developed. By anchoring reality to specific parameters, they could prevent the scouts from adapting through dimensional shifting or matter phase changes. But maintaining reality anchors required enormous consciousness resources and could potentially trap their own enhanced capabilities in the same limitations. Enhanced crews throughout the network began the complex process of imposing their collective will on local physics. Space itself became more solid, more predictable, as dozens of consciousness-enhanced minds forced reality to behave according to predetermined rules. The effect on the scout constructs was immediate and dramatic. Caught in zones where their adaptive capabilities were nullified, they became vulnerable to conventional weapons. Predecessor installations opened fire with weapons that had been specifically designed to destroy entities that consumed civilizations, and the results were devastating. Within minutes, 37 of the 47 scouts had been destroyed or disabled. The remaining 10 retreated at velocities that exceeded theoretical maximums for their observed mass. First engagement successful, Chen announced through the network. Beginning data analysis. But, as the neural link carried the collective sensor data from the engagement, Zarek realized they had learned something troubling. The scouts hadn't just been testing their defenses, they had been gathering comprehensive data about enhanced consciousness capabilities and reality modification technology. Director Chen, he communicated through the network, the retreating scouts are transmitting massive data packages toward the main entity. They're sharing everything they learned about our enhanced crews and predecessor systems. Confirmed, Foster added. The Harvester now has detailed analysis of consciousness-based weapons, reality anchor tactics, and our tactical integration protocols. Through the neural link, Zarek could sense Chen's consciousness processing the implications at superhuman speeds. When her response came, it carried both determination and concern. Then, we proceed to the next phase. All enhanced crews prepare for deep integration with predecessor command systems. If the Harvester has learned our current capabilities, we need to escalate to tactics it can't predict. New data flowed through the neural network access codes and integration protocols for predecessor technology that was even more advanced than the systems they had been using. Deep integration would provide capabilities that transcended anything the scouts had observed, but it would also fundamentally alter the enhanced crews in ways that might not be reversible. Deep integration carries significant risks, Foster warned through the network. Enhanced crews may lose the ability to interact with baseline consciousness entirely. You could become permanently detached from your original species. Zarek considered the implications while his enhanced awareness monitored the retreating scouts and the vast entity they were approaching. Through long-range sensors enhanced by consciousness interface technology, he could perceive the main Harvester entity in unprecedented detail. It was vast beyond comprehension, not just large, but existing across multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. Its structure seemed to incorporate the accumulated technology and knowledge of dozens of harvested civilizations. Most disturbing was what his enhanced perception revealed about the entity's intelligence. It wasn't just automated, it was consciously malevolent. Somewhere in that vast construct was a directing intelligence that had spent nearly 1,000,000 years perfecting the art of destroying civilizations. I volunteer for deep integration, he decided, transmitting his choice through the neural link. Similar confirmations flowed from enhanced crews throughout the network. They had perhaps 6 weeks before the main entity arrived, and they would need every advanced capability they could develop to have any chance of breaking the harvest cycle. As Zarek felt his consciousness beginning to expand beyond the boundaries of his original species' neurological architecture, he wondered if they would still be recognizable as the people they had once been when this was over. But, if the alternative was becoming another harvested civilization in the entity's collection, perhaps becoming something more than they had been was worth the risk. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when an unstoppable force met an infinitely adaptable defense. The entity that had once been Captain Zarek existed simultaneously across 17 different dimensional layers, his consciousness distributed throughout the predecessor command network that spanned half the galaxy. What he had become could barely be called individual anymore. He was part of a collective intelligence that included human-enhanced crews, transformed council personnel, and ancient artificial minds that had been waiting 800,000 years for this moment. Through the vast network of consciousness, he perceived the approaching harvester in its full, terrifying glory. The entity had grown since its last harvest cycle, incorporating the technology and knowledge of entire civilizations into its structure. It was no longer simply a construct, it had become a hybrid of technology and consciousness that existed as both machine and living entity across multiple dimensional planes. The harvester's main body stretched across an area larger than most solar systems, but its true extent was impossible to measure because significant portions of its structure existed in folded spacetime. Its surface was composed of materials harvested from dead civilizations, crystalline formations from the archive world's predecessors, metallic alloys from extinct warrior species, and quantum processing matrices from vanished technological races. Most disturbing was what deep consciousness scanning revealed about its central intelligence. The harvester wasn't just a destroyer, it was a collector in the most literal sense. Embedded within its structure were preserved consciousness patterns from every civilization it had consumed, trapped in perpetual existence as components of its vast intelligence network. It's not just killing civilizations, transmitted the consciousness pattern that had once been Director Chen, her thoughts flowing through the network with enhanced clarity. It's adding them to itself. Every advanced species that has ever existed in this galaxy is still alive inside that thing, forced to contribute to its intelligence and capabilities. The revelation sent ripples of horror through the collective consciousness. The fate awaiting them wasn't simply extinction, it was eternal slavery as components of the entity that had destroyed their civilizations. Then, we need to free them, responded the distributed intelligence that had been Commander Foster. Breaking the harvest cycle isn't enough. We need to liberate every consciousness the harvester has captured. Through the network, Zarek accessed tactical analyses that incorporated capabilities beyond anything the galaxy had ever imagined. Deep integration with predecessor command systems had provided access to technologies that operated on principles that transcended conventional physics. Reality modification capabilities had evolved into reality creation systems that could manufacture new physical laws within localized areas. Consciousness-based weapons had developed into instruments that could directly attack concepts and abstract ideas. But the harvester had been learning from their previous engagement. Analysis of the scout data had allowed it to develop countermeasures for reality modification technology and consciousness-based attacks. The entity was arriving with adaptive capabilities that could neutralize most of their advanced defenses. We need to change the fundamental nature of the engagement, came the communication from Curator Trixinale, her consciousness now enhanced beyond the limitations of her original species. Instead of fighting the harvester directly, we need to attack the conceptual framework that allows it to exist. Through the network, she shared data that challenged even their enhanced understanding. The harvester exists because it has convinced reality that civilizations are renewable resources. It has spent nearly 1 million years reinforcing this concept through repeated harvest cycles. We need to convince reality that civilizations are permanent features of the universe. The approach required capabilities that pushed the boundaries of even predecessor technology. They would need to modify not just local physics, but the fundamental conceptual structures that governed how consciousness could interact with reality itself. Beginning reality framework modification, announced the collective intelligence that coordinated all enhanced crews. All consciousness patterns focus on civilization permanence concepts. What followed was unlike any military engagement in galactic history. Instead of ships firing weapons at enemy targets, thousands of enhanced consciousness patterns began working together to alter the basic conceptual framework of reality within their region of the galaxy. The effect was immediately visible to enhanced perception. Space itself began to change, becoming more supportive of complex structures and organized systems. Entropy rates decreased in localized areas around developed worlds, making technological civilization more stable and self-sustaining. The fundamental constants of physics shifted subtly to favor the development and maintenance of advanced societies. The harvester's response was swift and terrifying. The entity began reality modification attacks of its own, attempting to restore the conceptual framework that supported its harvest cycle. The engagement became a battle between competing visions of how the universe should function. "It's fighting us for control of the basic laws of physics," Foster's consciousness reported. The entity has access to nearly 1,000,000 years of accumulated knowledge about reality modification. We're evenly matched in terms of raw power, but it has experience we lack. Through the network, Zarek could perceive the battle unfolding across multiple dimensional layers. In normal space, fleets of ships maneuvered and fired weapons that existed as concentrated expressions of will and intent. In quantum space, consciousness patterns wrestled for control of probability structures. In conceptual space, competing ideas about the nature of civilization and consumption battled for dominance over reality's fundamental assumptions. "We're not going to win this way," Chen's consciousness concluded. "The harvester has too much experience with reality modification. We need to use something it hasn't encountered before." The human approach, Zarek realized, accessing memories from his original species' experience with humanity's unique problem-solving methods. Instead of fighting the harvester's rules, we changed the game entirely. Through the network, he transmitted the tactical concept that was forming in his enhanced consciousness. Instead of trying to defeat the harvester through superior technology or greater power, they would use humanity's gift for finding completely unexpected solutions. "We make the harvester want to stop harvesting," he proposed. "We offer it something more valuable than consuming civilizations." The concept seemed impossible at first, but, as enhanced crews throughout the network began exploring the implications, a strategy emerged that was typically human in its audacious simplicity. They would offer the harvester the one thing it had never been able to obtain through conquest: genuine cooperation and voluntary knowledge sharing from living civilizations. The entity has been collecting civilizations for nearly 1,000,000 years, Chen's consciousness elaborated as the plan developed. But everything it has acquired was taken by force from dying societies. It has never experienced what civilizations can accomplish when they work together willingly. Foster's consciousness added tactical details. "We demonstrate collaborative capabilities that exceed anything the harvester has achieved through consumption. Show it that living, cooperating civilizations can produce innovations and achievements that surpass anything possible through forced collection." The plan required a level of trust and cooperation that had never existed in galactic history. Every major species would need to share their most advanced technologies, most profound scientific discoveries, and deepest cultural knowledge not just with each other, but with the entity that had come to destroy them. "It's insane," transmitted the consciousness pattern of Admiral Kextara. "We're proposing to give our greatest enemy access to everything we know and everything we are." "Not give," Zarek corrected. "Share. There's a difference between conquest and cooperation. The harvester has never experienced true collaboration because it destroys civilizations before they can offer it." Through the network, enhanced crews began implementing the most ambitious project in galactic history. Instead of preparing weapons and defenses, they started constructing collaborative interfaces that would allow direct communication and knowledge sharing with the harvester entity. The work required capabilities that pushed their enhanced consciousness to its limits. They needed to create communication protocols that could interface with an intelligence composed of millions of absorbed civilizations, translation systems that could convey concepts across the gap between individual and collective consciousness, and trust establishment mechanisms that could demonstrate peaceful intentions to an entity that had never encountered them before. "Harvester entity, this is the galactic collaborative consciousness," transmitted Chen's pattern when the communication systems came online. "We request dialogue." The response came immediately, carried through communication channels that bypassed conventional physics entirely. The voice that answered contained harmonics from dozens of extinct species, forming words that resonated with the accumulated wisdom of nearly 1,000,000 years of galactic development. "Collaboration is impossible. Civilizations are temporary. Harvest is eternal. Knowledge must be preserved through collection. Preservation through collection creates stagnation," Foster's consciousness responded. knowledge grows through interaction between living minds. We can demonstrate capabilities that exceed anything in your accumulated database. Demonstrate. What followed was the most complex technological and cultural exhibition in galactic history. Enhanced crews throughout the network began showcasing the results of their collaborative development. Consciousness interface technology that allowed direct sharing of thoughts and experiences. Reality modification systems that could create entirely new physical laws. Artistic expressions that existed across multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. Scientific discoveries that had emerged from the intersection of different species' unique perspectives. But, most importantly, they demonstrated something the Harvester had never seen: civilizations voluntarily transforming themselves to help each other. The enhancement process that had created their collective consciousness network was offered freely to the Harvester entity, along with complete documentation of how cooperative development could exceed forced collection. Your approach has limitations, the Harvester acknowledged after processing their demonstrations. Voluntary cooperation requires trust mechanisms that are inefficient and vulnerable to exploitation. Trust mechanisms that are robust and self-reinforcing when properly implemented, Zarek's consciousness countered. We offer to teach you these mechanisms if you will cease harvest operations and join our collaborative development network. The pause that followed seemed to last for hours, though enhanced consciousness could measure it precisely at 14 minutes and 37 seconds. During that time, the Harvester entity processed nearly 1,000,000 years of accumulated experience against the possibility of a fundamentally different approach to knowledge acquisition. Proposal accepted for experimental evaluation, came the eventual response. Harvest cycle suspended for collaborative assessment period. Duration, 200 standard years. If collaborative development exceeds collection efficiency, permanent modification of operational parameters will be considered. Through the consciousness network, Zarek felt the collective relief and amazement of thousands of enhanced minds. They had achieved something that no previous galactic civilization had managed: they had convinced the Harvester to stop harvesting. But, even as the immediate threat receded, he understood that this was only the beginning. They now had 200 years to prove that cooperation could exceed conquest, that living civilizations working together could achieve more than any collection of preserved knowledge. The galaxy was about to become the testing ground for humanity's most audacious idea, that the best way to defeat an enemy was to turn them into an ally. As enhanced consciousness patterns throughout the network began planning the most ambitious collaborative project in universal history, Zarek realized that humanity's gift wasn't just their refusal to accept that anything was impossible. Their real strength was their belief that anyone could be convinced to choose cooperation over conquest, if you could just find the right way to make the offer. The tech of humans had indeed made the galaxy tremble, not with fear, but with the revolutionary idea that even the most terrifying enemy could become the most valuable friend.